You mentioned something earlier about creating story worlds. Where did that come from? Where did that occur to you? Most people probably don't think, again, in those terms.
Mm-hmm.
Where is this coming from, the story world idea?
Sure. Will and I, we had this idea for the sci-fi series. So we were pretty interested in how do we make a world, a sci-fi world that doesn't exist yet, you know? Like, because there have been great iconic sci-fi worlds created, and we wanted to do something sort of on that level. But we had to figure out, like, how to build a world, which is a super hard and fascinating thing to do, you know? So it's like, if there's this technology that we create, like, how does that affect the world, you know? Let's try to build that up, you know? So we started thinking about, you know, the macro stuff, like, how does politics work? How does religion work? How are people? How does this technology affect them? And you just sort of go out in these branches and try to nail down this world, because you have to be super specific, you know, because you need to know how everything operates, you know, how people would react in this world. Do they speak differently? Did this piece of technology alter it in that way? You know, and doing all of that work. And we spent, I would say, a solid 6 months just building the world before we even wrote the story. You know, we had a general idea of what we wanted the story to be, you know, going back to like what we're trying to say. But we had to really flesh out this world and figure out what would work and what didn't work, and how it was different from other things, and how it had touch points of similarities. So it's not so alien that people, you know, are sort of thrown by it and can't get into it. But yeah, a full at least 6 months trying to create this thing in order to just start thinking about the story and the characters that would really populate it.
Do you ever listen to some of the science fiction authors or screenwriters on how they've, like a Philip K. Dick or whatever, on how they would create worlds or just the headspace they were in? I realize some of it was maybe chemically induced with some, but you know, even like Ursula K. Le Guin, just she was a mother of 4, and then she's coming up with these amazing worlds. I don't know how she's doing it, and then seems incredibly sane in these interviews, you know. And do you ever listen to just these people in their process?
You know, I haven't really. It was sort of the thing where we just made what we thought would be a good process ourselves. Like, let's just sort of blue sky this. And it was just a series of long conversations and, you know, just figuring out what we thought would work and what sort of bumped against what could work.
Maybe it's best you didn't, because then you might try to emulate that style, and then it's too cliche.
Right.
And then it's like, oh, I see what they were going for. They were trying to do, you know, Scanner Darkly or something, you know. Have you carried that world building over into other projects, or it's just for this one that you're working on specifically now with Will?
I think maybe not the world building itself, but how we created sort of a working relationship, and how we thought of ideas and stories. I think that's what we really took for it. You know, for example, I didn't need to create this whole like big world document for Broken Ceiling, because it's, you know, set in now in an industry that I know, that I'm, you know, aware of. So for something like that, I didn't need to do. You know, if something's set in present day or in the world, you don't necessarily have to do that. However, for this period piece pilot about miners that we wrote, we did have to create a world there too, because, you know, it's set in the 1920s, which we obviously didn't live through. And then it was like, well, do we want to make a heightened version of that? Do we want to, you know, stick straight to the historical accuracy? So that was something that was sort of a follow-up project to that, where, you know, even though it's a period piece, we still had to sort of create that world, like how these characters would live. So it really depends on the story and where it is in time. And I assume that if I was going to make something, you know, in present day, that was something that I didn't even know about, set in another country or whatever, I would have to do that same sort of world building as well, based on research, of course.
Do you ever put a time limit on your research? Because I would imagine it would become extremely fun.
Sure, yeah. I mean, I'm not, as much as I've had to do research, it's not my favorite part. I really want to get to the writing and the story breaking and the character stuff. But yeah, there is a thing, and this goes not only for world building research, but character research. There is such a thing as too much research, Like, for example, you don't need to necessarily know what a character was doing when they were 8 years old, right? You may not need to create that much of a character background or history if this character is in their 30s, and it's set over the course of a week. Like, how much is that really going to inform you? Or is it the type of thing where you're going to want to find a way to shoehorn in that memory from, when they were 8 years old into the scene because you did the work? So I think it's a very interesting sort of dichotomy of how much is too much, research what you need, don't over-research, and make sure that you're actually getting those pages written.